This is the Outlap F1 podcast featuring America's own John, James, Andy, and Deanna, your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. Join us on the Outlap. What is up, Outlap F1 Nation? We are on the precipice of the 2024 season. Welcome on in. This is going to be season 6. This is episode number 3 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2024 Bahrain and overall season preview. You've got Andy, and I'm along with my wonderful co-host, as always, Mr. Cody. It's good to see you. It's been a couple weeks since we've done one of these, but I think we've worked out all of the kinks. At least I hope we have. And I hope we're sounding pretty good. So how's it been, and how you doing?
It's been great, and I am very psyched up for this season because I've seen it all so far, man. I've gotten the testing, I've gotten all Drive to Survive in, and all that's left is to get a real race weekend in, and I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, I've had enough of my appetizers. The test is always like that appetizer where, like, you think you know what the meal's going to be like, but you don't really know, so you're kind of still anticipating. And with Drive to Survive coming out, it always is a slick-looking production, regardless of how they do it. So, I'm trying to remember back from last season and going, I kind of remember where we were when this was going on and what were we talking about then and there. So that's always good. And like I said, those are just like little morsels, little appetizers. But the season is here, and it's going to come at us fast and furious now. We have the most races on offer ever attempted in an F1 season, and we are going to do our best to try to cover all of that. So if you found our show, welcome along, as David Croft won't be doing all the races this year, but he will be doing all but I think 3. Would say. You can find our show still on Twitter or X, whatever they're calling that. Instagram, we are there. Discord, we are there. Reddit, we are there. And, of course, YouTube. At Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle. If you like what you're watching, if we happen to be on YouTube right now, or you like what you're listening to, do us a solid. Click the like and subscribe button if you're on YouTube, or click the 5-star button on your favorite podcasting app, specifically Apple Podcast or Spotify. All that does help us come up a little bit better in search results, helps us get our content to you that much quicker. You can email the show, chat now at outlapf1.com. We'll take you there. The website is still down. I'm still working on it, trying to get that resuscitated. I'm trying to give it CPR. It will be www.outlapf1.com once I can do that. Outlap F1 Nation continues to step up, as always. Thank you so much to our continued monetary supporters: Dean Warwick, Erie Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to become a member of the hashtag Outlap F1 Nation, we're trying to build it as much as we can. You can see our anchor page. It's in our show notes. $1, $5, all goes back into the show, all goes into making the show better, investing in new equipment, working out the kinks on the equipment we already have. Sometimes the challenge, but it all goes into trying to make us a little bit better, and we're doing that for you. So you can see our link again in our show notes for that. And just a final message: the good folks at Manscaped, our code is still good. You can use it, OUTLAP. That is Outlap, all one word. Gets you 20% off and free shipping from their fabulous line of product there. All right. Well, where should we dive in? We've had the test. I think I watched 20 of maybe the 24 hours, only taking cat naps here and there. Proof that I don't sleep very well some nights, I think, is really the answer. But, it's exciting. But, to finally see the cars break cover, see actual cars, not just renderings, not just virtual renderings, not just cars looking a certain way in a spotlight. And you couldn't really hide anything. But so my notes kind of overall from the 3 days, and each day was a little bit different, but for the most part, I thought everybody ran, for the most part, pretty reliably. Lots of laps getting turned by pretty much just about everybody. But oh man, when you start about looking at competitive order, holy frickin' Red Bull! Oh my gosh, did they just look um, that car just looks sick. It looks like they've taken the zero side pod concept that Mercedes tried, and oh well, here it is, and here's how it works. That car just looks easy to drive, especially on day one with Max Verstappen. You saw the look of there's the shot of the engineer right when Max does his not even a full push lap, but a half push lap, and he's just got that Cheshire Cat grin on his face. Oh my God. Are we just writing off this season already, or do you think there's still a little bit of a chink in the armor there somewhere?
I don't think anyone else has a chance. I think Red Bull. I think Red Bull's got this in the bag. I thought Red Bull had it in the bag at the end of last season for this year because they were just so dominant, and I figured they were just going to continue on developing that same concept to perfection, and maybe the gap would close a little bit, and we wouldn't see Max winning 19 of the races. But I thought they would still be pretty dominant. What I wasn't expecting is for their car to look significantly different than it did last year, right as everyone else is copying last year's concept and trying to narrow in on that. They go for something completely different. And even the drivers were kind of like, "Whoa, what's going on here? This is a lot different than we were expecting." And it turns out, at least from testing, that it looks like they've got it nailed because Max Verstappen was particularly pleased with how testing went. From what I've seen in interviews, he pretty much said that the car did everything that he wanted it to do, which means he can stick it anywhere he wants on the track. And when Max can do that, I think it's going to be no competition.
Yeah, when you see a lot of purple mini sectors in the middle of a test, when you're like 4 hours plus into a session, and all of a sudden now he's setting the purple mini sector times, and it's just purple, 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 purple. Yeah, that doesn't bode well. I got a funny feeling we're going to see a lot of that. Um, that having been said, you still have to run the races. You still have 24 of them to run, but they are definitely the money favorite coming out of the test. They hit the pocket aces out of the test. You didn't know what that new concept was going to look like. You thought maybe, especially on day one, it looked like he was struggling a little bit. But whatever they did, they adjusted it between session 1 and session 2 on the first day, and in that second day under the lights. They fixed whatever seemed to be ailing that car, and they really haven't looked back since. Kind of interesting. Sergio Perez didn't really have the great test like Max did. You have to think that car is very much Max centric. So that could be something to watch. So it's not so much, I don't think, beating Red Bull as a team as much as it's going to be trying to beat Max, because that dude's just been a machine. He's been Thanos. He's been inevitable. And I hate to say, before we even have turned a wheel in anger here, this may be a long one if we're looking for him not to win. We may be hoping for some reliability issues or something like that to creep up, because I don't know who's beating him flat out straight yet. But we will have to see. So kind of the next one down on the pecking order, but also who had a very good test, were the Ferraris. I thought they came out of the box looking very strong. Car looked pretty good, looked stable, different runs. They did manage to get the top times on the last 2 days, but they were on a softer compounded tire than the Red Bull set their times on. So, that could definitely have something to do with it. But it looks like, and from just interviews and stuff that I've watched about it, they seem pretty happy with their car, at least going into the first couple races. So they may be that, best of all the rest. The only question that I have, we haven't seen a race, so we haven't seen a strategy call yet, because that's the only thing that I think really hinders them, is if they start to screw themselves over on strategy, like sometimes they are apt to do. But at least, in terms of the practices and what I think is going to be the qualifying pecking order, they look pretty good.
They do look really good, and they were saying that some of the issues that they were having with like tire degradation and inconsistency with the car's performance on the track, a lot of that has been improved on. So it's a lot more consistent. They can better push the car now, which I think will really help them, especially on like the one lap pace type stuff. I think we'll see a lot more Ferrari pole positions coming through. If not, hopefully some race wins here. It would be really nice to see Carlos Sainz get another win or two before he leaves Ferrari and goes to God, who knows where. But this is his best chance, I think, right now. No matter where he's going to go next, unless he's going to Red Bull somehow. I think this is his, I hate to say it, his last chance to get some wins before, maybe he goes to soon to be Audi, and at the end of the decade, they've got some car for him to maybe get wins again if he goes there. But I think right now he's got to squeeze him in while he can. And Charles Leclerc is awesome, and I think if the car is there, that he'll be competing right up at the front with Max. It's just the car has to be good enough to stack up against Red Bull, and even if their car is significantly better than last year, is that good enough to keep up?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the consensus delta that I've read across the board, it seems like it's 0.3 a lap, which doesn't sound as bad as it certainly looked after that first day of testing. But over the course of a race, 30 laps, that's, 10, 12 seconds. That's hard to overcome. So, we'll have to see kind of what it looks like. I'm actually really interested to see free practice 2 tomorrow with the long runs, after the qualifying sims, because I actually think most of these teams, the top 5, I think are going to be really close on ultimate pace. And I think it's going to come down to how do the tires work, who can do what on the long run pace, because as we saw last year, there were teams that could stay with Red Bull for a portion of a tire run. It was just over the course of that run, Red Bull would just pull away because they could be consistent longer. And I think that's where Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, Aston all have to try to aspire to get to. So, yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. But I think Ferrari, a slight bit in front of the next glob, and I'm going to say the glob because I think this is where your fight is going to be, especially early. And that's 3 teams, and I don't know how you pick them. Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin all seem to be really darn close. They're all happy with kind of their base setup. Mercedes has done the pivot. James Allison looked significantly happier than it was this time last year. Feedback from Russell and Hamilton has said that it seems like they've cured the underlying ill that was the last 2 iterations of Mercedes cars. So they're happy. McLaren hit the ground actually not running, but at least they were walking in their test this year. So it was a much better test for them. They did have some reliability issues, but I'm not too concerned about it because why? They weren't the same problem. Like the last couple of years, it was that front brake problem. It was constantly overheating. They could not figure out, and they had to jury rig a solution just to get the car to go back out. This one day it was a fuel pump problem, which a couple teams have had, and that's endemic to these engines. Sometimes the fuel pumps go bad. And another day, I think it was something unrelated to that, but it was, sometimes a floor change here or there keeps you in the garage a couple hours, and then you're not out for a while, and everybody wonders where the heck you are. So the big thing was day 3, Lando Norris didn't get his race simulation in. Oscar Piastri did. Yeah, I thought overall they had a decent test. Aston Martin look fairly confident. Their big step or their big development is usually at the start of the season. They don't necessarily tend to bring huge development throughout the season. And it's going to be interesting, the dynamic, I think, between Aston Martin and McLaren, because I think Aston will start out with a slight edge, and I think over the course of the season, McLaren may catch and pass them.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's looking like another slow-ish start from McLaren, not nearly as slow as last year. But actually, I don't really think I saw a whole lot of Aston Martin's running or really even heard a whole lot about it. But I figure they were so great out of the box last year that they can't have fallen back too far. I would figure they still got to be within that glob, as you call it. But yeah, it sounds like everyone is much happier with their cars this year. Even Red Bull, but definitely Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, definitely much happier with where their cars are at compared to a year ago. Aston Martin is the only one that I'm not really entirely sure on, but I think they're going to still be in that top 5 for sure. And even like the V-carb car, everyone was saying that they were going to perform better now that they're using more parts and kind of going more of that Red Bull design way as much as they can. And it does look like that car has significantly upped its performance compared to last year too. And the car was already starting to look better at the end of last year, and you were starting to get more consistent performances out of Ricardo and Sonoda. But I think they're going to be in that position from the start of this season, which will be really good for them.
Yeah, I mean, I've got in my notes here, I've got V-Carb, Sauber, and Williams in the next kind of glob, the 6, 7, 8, and you can kind of pick them. I think it's going to be very circuit specific between all of them, with basically then Haas and Alpine. And again, you can flip flop the order any way you want. I think those Alpine have admitted they expect to kind of struggle. They had a whole lot of optimism coming into the season. They completely changed what they said on their launch, every aspect of the car. Excuse me. And it didn't look like it cooked very well. Haas had admitted that they were going to be pretty much at the back in the first couple races. They were very reliable. They did manage to pound through a lot of laps, and report actually came out today that they think they've finally solved their endemic tire problem. So, I mean, now they can finally start to bring performance to that car, and we'll have to see if that order shakes up at all.
That would be awesome because it really stinks when it's like you can count on one team to be well at the back. And I feel like Haas is perennially there. I'd love for them to get a little better performance because, they've got decent drivers who I'm sure would love to get more points finishes. And Alpine is the big surprise that they look so poor. And I really feel bad for Gasly and Ocon because they're both young, hungry, like really talented drivers. They made a big point of it in Drive to Survive that it's that you got the perfect French team, French team, French drivers. It works out really well for publicity, but it's not going to work out super great if they're hanging out at the back all the time.
And American investors who aren't used to watching, who don't have a lot of patience. So the dynamic there is going to be very, very interesting. If you watch Drive to Survive, you watch the episode where they finally boot Otmar, who looked like they never let him do his job. And I feel like they kind of did him kind of dirty, especially in the middle of the season. It just didn't feel right at the time to me. And it just kind of gets exasperated by when I watched it back, especially through the DTS lens. But yeah, I mean, this is a team that everything should cook. It just isn't. And I can't figure out why. And that it's just a giant confusion for me as to why they struggle so much. And they don't have another team to compare their engine to. So it could be engine, it could be aero, it could be any number of different things. You can't tell. That's really the problem, is because they don't have another team. They don't have anybody else any other resources to tap to try to figure anything out. And they just keep seeming like they churn through personnel, and until they eventually find the right one, I don't see that getting any better anytime soon. So, yeah, I guess we'll just kind of leave those there. Maybe they prove me wrong halfway through the year, but anyway, that's kind of the recap of the tests and kind of where we saw kind of the initial pecking order, at least through that. And we'll have to see when we actually get to the racing and get to qualifying. That may change a little bit. But the other big story came out today. We've been following the Christian Horner investigation by the Red Bull GmbH company. They have ruled, however they have, that Christian Horner is in the clear. He's been cleared of any potential wrongdoing by the company. He will now resume his post as team principal. He expects to be on the pit wall. I think he was actually on a flight after hearing the news back to Bahrain today. He won't be at the team principal's presser tomorrow, but I do expect him to be on the pit wall, and he probably will be available to the media to talk about it, I'm sure, in front of a giant media scrum at some point over the weekend, as these stories are apt to do. Cody, are we surprised? There wasn't a whole lot of detail that was given about exactly what they investigated and really what the accusation was. There's a lot of speculation out there in the world, but A lot of rumor, not a lot of fact.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it. Is that there wasn't really enough clear information coming through in the media to say with confidence one way or the other whether he was going to get canned or not. Um, you know, it's seeped through in the media that it was related to possible inappropriate conduct with a female member of the team, I believe, and that type of stuff is really bad. Any company that you work for, you get accused of something like that, and it's going to be taken, I would hope, very very seriously. And it looks like they did take it seriously enough to launch a formal investigation by the team into it to see what actually happened and if those allegations held any water. But they've decided that Christian Horner is in the clear, and I hope and assume that they did their due diligence and they looked into it reasonably. So uh, he's got to be feeling real good about it. And he seemed he was present at a lot of the Red Bull functions. He was there at the car launch and everything. He didn't really talk about it much because he said it was under investigation and that was the end of it. But he seemed pretty confident that he was going to end up in the clear. So, I guess you got to have some faith in the process and that everything went the way that it was supposed to go. I don't, now that he's in the clear, who knows how much detail we're actually going to get about it. I would think they would just want to, at this point, now that he's in the clear, just kind of move on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's probably the only thing that they're going to do. I mean, at this point, it kind of just sucks that when it kind of leaks like this is to me something that should have been handled regardless of the accusation behind closed doors, because nobody wins in this. If it did happen, there's a victim out there that now is not being believed, and that is wrong. If it didn't happen, what can Christian Horner do or say to actually clear his name in the minds of a lot of people? So he can't win in this. Red Bull can't win in this. The accuser has a perspective on this that isn't necessarily even being really talked about. So nobody wins in a situation like this. So to me, I mean, I do work in some capacity as our HR person, and you got to take that stuff really seriously. You do, but the other thing is you have to kind of keep it kind of locked down to respect privacy because it's such a sensitive matter. And you read social media and everybody's just kind of drawing their own conclusions on it. Does it feel like that sometimes they just get away with whatever they want to do? I can follow that perspective, but I also know he's got a right to defend himself as well. Um, I don't know. I don't have an opinion on, do I think he did it or do I not? I was waiting for some fact, and I don't think we're ever going to get that. So it's unfortunate that this all kind of came out the way that it did. And I wish kind of everybody the best as we all try to move on from it, because there really wasn't anything. There's nothing for me to glob on to say, yep, that was absolutely the wrong decision, or nope, that's absolutely the right decision. I have no idea what those 100 pages say. And until those ever find the light of day, not that I even necessarily want them to, I think that's just kind of where we're going to leave it. All right. So the last kind of story before we actually dig into our first Grand Prix weekend of the season, Toto Wolff has come out and said that it was the fear of losing the prized pupil in Kimi Antonelli that led to the Lewis Hamilton contract being only 2 years in length. And then, of course, as we all know, Lewis Hamilton opted out of that second year and will switch to Ferrari. Cody, is this an own goal by Toto? I mean, you gotta hope Kimi Antonelli is good as advertised, because I think that just ramped up a whole lot of pressure on this kid.
It definitely does, and the saying is, what is it? I can't even remember. One in something about birds in the bush. Anyway,
one in the hand, two in the bush, or something like
yeah, there
that.
you go.
Yeah.
You got Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion. One of the greatest there's ever been, if not the greatest. And you've got him at your team. You've had him there for a long time. He's been very successful. So you know what he's got, and that is a lot. And yes, it's true. He is getting older. He is probably in the twilight of his career at this point. Uh, but we've seen that drivers can continue, quite a long time. I mean, look at Fernando Alonso. The guy's, in his 40s. He's very competitive.
Yep.
And so I think that Lewis has what it takes to be a very high performing driver for many years to come. And I have to imagine that what they're looking at, though, is that how many more years are they going to get out of him? And they have to really start looking towards the future and deciding who's going to, take that seat alongside George Russell. George Russell's a young guy, very talented, probably going to be there for the long haul. And they're looking for someone else to take that seat in that capacity alongside him. And yes, is it Andrea Kimi Andrea Antonelli? He's very talented in the junior series, so much so that they saw fit to have him skip Formula 3, go straight to Formula 2, where, I hope that he's going to find a lot of success. It's very exciting to see, another very talented young prospect, but he hasn't even raced in Formula 2 yet. So how much do we really know? He might run into some roadblocks here, and he might need a few more years to figure it out. You never know if he might never figure it out. I think with how much talent we've seen out of him, he probably will. But it might not be immediate. And because of that, now you're losing out on the last, several years out of Lewis Hamilton, where he's going to be very competitive, and he's going to your main rival in the championship right now, who you just barely outscored last season. It looks like they've got a really good car this year, so they'll probably have a pretty good car for him next year. He's going to be against you now. So I guess in a way we can say thank you to Toto, because now we get to see Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari, which is just, I never thought it would happen. It's going to be really cool. But yeah, I would say a little bit of an own goal.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I mean, it feels like you're cutting off your nose to save your face type of situation. To me, if I'm going to let Lewis Hamilton decide when he's done, I think he is honest enough. I think he is figured himself out enough to be honest with himself and to tell Toto Wolff or anybody else. And if he tells Toto Wolff, I still think I have something, and Toto Wolff, for whatever reason, didn't believe him. It's just it's something I never thought I would ever hear myself say. Like, Toto Wolff didn't believe Lewis Hamilton when he said that he was committed and had enough.
He doesn't even have to believe him. The statistics are there. He beat Russell quite handily
Right.
last year. Like, he still got it. He finished third in the championship behind the Red Bulls.
Exactly. Like, it's not even an opinion. It's a legitimate fact that he's still fast and he's still really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And still probably elite, even at the age that he's at. And we're going to find out, in the next, obviously this year, we're definitely going to find out next year, where this is going to go. But I feel if you're Kimi Antonelli and you read this, hopefully he's not reading it, because like, all that guy should want to go out and do is learn his craft and go out and race and be relaxed and feel the flow of trying to get around an F2 car, which is not an easy thing. Have you seen those rear wings? Those don't look exactly inviting, and how that's all going to go. And now the pressure on this poor kid just got ramped up a lot, and pressure does one of two things. It either turns you into a diamond or it crushes you. And we're going to find out, unfortunately, really, really fast about the value of one Kimi Antonelli.
Yeah, we put so much faith in you that we lost the greatest driver ever, possibly. Like, yeah, that's gonna be like crushing.
I mean, yeah, like I said, I hope he doesn't read that story, because I don't want to see anybody, fail when they could have a great career in front of them. But it definitely will make my F2 viewing a lot more interesting. I will be following it a lot more closely this year, as we see kind of what all transpires there. But yeah, interesting admission on the first weekend of the season.
Mm-hmm.
All right, one more thing before we actually do get into our track facts, and actually we'll take a little break before we do that. Drive to Survive season 6. You said you were able to watch all of them. I've watched all, but I think the last 2. So Cody, what are your kind of overarching thoughts on Drive to Survive? Is season 6 any better or any worse than any of the other years? And then I'll chime in with mine.
I've watched, I think this is the 3rd season of Drive to Survive that I've watched. I think I watched, the first one I watched was the one that followed the 2021 season, because like, why wouldn't you? It was the greatest season that I've ever seen. But I would say it's my least favorite season that I've seen. It definitely has its moments. Like, it's great to see, the cars on the track, and, really, high definition, and you get to hear a little bit more about the driver radio that you don't see on the broadcast. And it is cool to see the drivers off the track, and the teams off the track, and see kind of what goes on, in the background. But there's still some things I don't like about it. Like, it's always been highly dramatized. It's always been curated in such a way that it adds to the drama, and it's not necessarily exactly what happened, or in the exact order that things happened. I would say with this season too, there was a lot more about like team principals and their roles, and there was a lot of things that changed. You had Fred Vasseur go to Ferrari. You had Otmar Zafnauer get canned literally in the middle of a race weekend. But I feel like there was a little too much of that. Like, there was 2 episodes like dedicated to Alpine and like the not getting along between Gasly and Ocon, and all of the discourse with higher up people in Alpine that eventually led to Zafnauer getting losing his job. And yeah, I think there was a little too much of that. There was also a very, very noticeable absence of really anything Red Bull, which I found to be kind of disturbing, because like, they're the talk of the season. Max got 19 wins, Red Bull won all but one race, like extremely dominant. And of course, you got Christian Horner. He's always in there. I think he loves being in front of the camera. But there was barely any screen time for Verstappen or Perez. Barely any mention of their dominance, and it felt very strange. You got all these other stories that are being focused on, like Ferrari versus Mercedes, Aston Martin coming out of the gate, and like, yeah, those were definitely very interesting, great stories. But I feel like you're kind of like, you're ignoring the elephant in the room here, and that felt a little jarring to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've talked about this probably every time I look at Drive to Survive. I mean, from a slick production standpoint, it's amazing. UHD or 4K HD or whatever maximum resolution you can get it in is the best way to watch it, because the cars sound better. They look more clear than you're ever going to see. The only way you can get clear is to literally be on the wall there recording them. You can't get a whole lot closer, really. And it's interesting. It's interesting to hear some of the extra audio and stuff that you don't necessarily pick up in other places. That being said, they get very, very creative about when they're dipping that audio in.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that irks me is I have never heard a team radio where there's an engineer talking to a driver on the first lap. They're all shutting the hell up, letting the drivers do what they do, and they'll come back to the driver on lap 2 or 3 or whatever once they kind of get that initial part settled. No, the one that actually made me actually almost do a spit take was when Lando takes the lead at the British Grand Prix and they insert a "yeah, baby," and I'm like, "There's no way he said that right then." And he didn't say it right then. Like, he only says that at like the very end of a race.
Mm-hmm.
And like, believe it or not, most of the communication is all very business until the end.
Yep.
So you got to understand that. And look, if they wanted to do it to build a story, I understand it. Fine. it's fine. Like me as a hardcore, maybe I get a little offended, but if it brings more people into it, I'm cool with that.
I do
Go
think
ahead.
that they one last complaint that I have is I feel like now I understand that a lot of people who watch Drive to Survive are not super hardcore Formula One fans like me and you. That said, I feel like they've gone to extreme lengths to dumb it down, almost to the point where you've got Will Buxton saying stuff along almost like, if the cars don't go fast, you're not going to win the race. And it's like, he's saying stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, no shit. Like, people can figure that out. Like, you don't have to say that. But they did that so much throughout the season. And it was like a little cringy at times.
Yeah, and Will probably has owned that, I think, over the course of his career. There's the one meme of like, if the driver wins this race, he'll get the most points. Like, ooh, that needed to be stated, apparently, because we
You
didn't
don't
know
say.
that. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Like, to me, it hasn't changed. I don't know that this season was particularly revealing, other than some of maybe the background meetings that in the McLaren episode between Zach and the sponsors. Interested to know exactly when that was. Was it right after the test? Was because the other thing that wasn't mentioned was they were saying right after that test that we had upgrades in the pipeline, they're just not here. There was no mention of that during that. So interesting as to maybe like, is that test day 3 when, all of a sudden they had a plan and it didn't go to plan and then they had to shift from it. And maybe that's when a sponsor comes up and says, hey, Zach, what the F is going on here? So that was interesting. The Alpine episode, it's interesting to see kind of who the higher ups really are and who's actually kind of running that show, because that's part of the question that I think I overall had was with Alpine is who the heck is really in charge over there, because they don't seem to want to know. And I thought that, yeah, I mean, the same thoughts that I had about Otmar getting fired in the middle of the season, yeah, that renewed them for me. So there's a lot of good, there's a lot of and there's some that just kind of annoys the crap out of me, but it is what it is. It's the same kind of thing. But it's out. You can watch it. I will finally watch the last couple episodes over the course. I'll probably catch up. Since we don't have a race on Sunday, I'll probably catch up on it Sunday and probably finish it off. But yeah, it's out. Check it out if you are so inclined. All right. So we're going to take a quick break. We will come back. We'll drop our green flag. We'll get into our Bahrain track facts. We'll do our Choose Your Champion predictions, and we'll give you kind of a where to watch your F1 and then kind of a quickie where we think the constructors are going to be and who the top 10 drivers who we think are going to be. And then we'll come back to it at the end of the season and see how wrong we really were. All right. So stand by and come on back. We'll be right back and we'll get into it. You are listening to the Outlap F1 podcast, and we'll be right back after this quick pit stop. Grab your flu powder, broomstick, or apparate to your favorite audio streaming service to join the discussion on Hogwarts, a podcast, where Dan and his friends have in-depth chapter-by-chapter breakdowns of each Harry Potter novel. Join the group as they dive into the magical world and discuss plot points, analyze character development, and occasionally go off the rails. Whether you're a muggle who's new to the series or a pure-blood wizard who won't need a remember-all, Hogwarts, a podcast, brings everyone to the Great Hall for a magical discussion. Hogwarts, a podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back in. This is Season 6. This is Episode 3 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2024 Bahrain Grand Prix race preview, as well as the season preview. And you've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. And we're going to drop our green flag and get into the Bahrain track facts brought to us by the good folks at Pirelli Motorsport. So, Cody, tell us about the Sakir circuit.
All right. So this year we are actually celebrating the 20th anniversary of running the Bahrain Grand Prix. Track is located in Sakir, Bahrain. A number of laps around the circuit for the Grand Prix is 57, and the track length is 5.412 kilometers. That's 3.362 miles, and consists of 15 turns. Tire selection for this race is the C1 for hard, C2 for medium, and C3 for soft. And the track characteristics from Pirelli are a 4 out of 5 for traction, 4 out of 5 for asphalt grip, 5 out of 5 for asphalt abrasion, 4 out of 5 for track evolution, 3 out of 5 for tire stress, 4 out of 5 for braking, 3 out of 5 for asphalt grip, 3 out of 5 for lateral load, and 3 out of 5 for downforce. Qualifying lap record at this track goes to Lewis Hamilton, set in 2020, and that is a 1 minute 27.264 seconds, while the race lap record has stood the test of time. That was set back in 2005 by Pedro de la Rosa with a 1 minute 31.447 second time, and we may see that record get broken in possibly the next couple seasons. Most wins at this track goes to Lewis Hamilton with 5 wins, followed by Sebastian Vettel with 4, Fernando Alonso with 3, and Felipe Massa with 2, while the most constructor wins goes to Ferrari with 7, followed by Mercedes with 6, Red Bull with 3, and Renault with 2. What is the circuit like, Andy?
All right, so you can usually expect great racing and decent amounts of overtaking in Bahrain, while the drivers have to contend with wind, racing under the floodlights, and the difficulty of finding a decent setup with the wide temperature fluctuations between sessions. The track's most challenging point is the tight downhill, off-camber, turn 10 left-hander, while the fast run through turn 12 is another highlight, allowing the racers to really feel their cars coming alive. As for the weather, should be a bit cooler than we saw during the tests. So for qualifying, a clear and sunny in the daylight, high of 69 degrees Fahrenheit, dropping to 60. Winds out of the northwest at 10 to 15, so a little bit gusty there. A scant 1% chance of rain. And for the race, a mostly clear sky after a high of 69, dropping to 61. Winds will be a little bit lighter for the race, which should help the cars out a little bit. Winds out of the southeast at 4 miles per hour. A 0% chance of rain for the race on Sunday. So, we will just hop straight into our predictions. And I can cue that up if I can find that. Let's see if it actually switches.
Hey.
Oh, look at that! Woohoo!
Good to be back.
Functioning soundboard. It's time for the Choose Your Champion Predictions Game 2024 edition. We're pretty much going to keep a lot of the same rules like we did last year because we found that it worked okay. All right. So we will start, as we are apt to do, with the pole sitter, the 2023 time. I have to update all these to say 23 now. That just feels weird. Was a Max Verstappen on pole with a 129.708. Anybody other than Max here, Cody? I think we're in lockstep here.
Yeah. I mean, with the first race of the season, you've only got testing to go off of, so it's an educated shot in the dark, I guess. But based on how well they did, they seem to do in testing, and being that he is the defending champ by a significant margin, got to go with Max this time.
Yeah, I wanted to have half a mind to say, put a Charles Leclerc in there because I think it will. I think actually the qualifying will probably be the tightest. Will be a little bit more tight. I do think the Ferrari is strong, especially over the one lap. But I don't know that it's going to get to Max. I got a funny feeling Max is just going to do. We're finally going to see that car unleashed, and we're going to see if there is a gap, how big that gap is, at least around Bahrain. And that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to put an asterisk around this track and the test and say, who's going to be good here. We don't know who's going to be good in other places. But here I'm going to go with Max Verstappen. I can't see anybody else taking it, at least at this point. So I've got Max on the pole. All right, so for our qualifying pole lap time, last year, as we said, was a 129.708. We going any faster than that? Cody, what you got?
I do got us going a little faster than that. Everyone seems to be developing these cars very well, making them much more consistent and easier to drive. So I'm going ballpark about a half second faster than last year's time. So I'm going with a 1 minute 29.289 seconds.
All right, very good. I'm also going faster than last year. I do think that these cars in general, if everybody's liking them better, everybody can push a little bit harder, go a little bit faster. That is what I think is what we're going to see. So I've got a 129, a little bit quicker than you, 129.010, almost into the 128s, but I don't think we're going to quite get there. But that's what I'm going with for my pole lap time. All right, so shifting gears and moving into the race on Saturday. Can't say the race on Sunday. I have to say the race on Saturday. So who do we have on the podium here? I'll go first. Can't take it away from Max yet. So I think Max is going to be on the podium in P1. I do think that Ferrari is quick, and I do think Charles Leclerc is going to give Sergio Perez a good fight and maybe some fits here. So I've got Leclerc coming in P2. But I do think that Red Bull is just the class of the field, and I do think Sergio Perez will put up a heck of a fight, but I do think he will come home in P3.
My podium prediction is very similar to yours. I do have Max Verstappen winning the race. Based on the fact that they brought home the 1-2 last year, I am going to put Sergio Perez in P2 and Leclerc in P3.
All right, very good. All right, so we move into that fastest lap in the driver. The 2023 time was Zhao Gran Yu actually had the fastest lap with a 133.996. I'm going to go with Max Verstappen to take that fastest lap. I think it's especially like that last pit stop. He's going to come on out. He's going to throw down the marker and say, come find it. And I don't know that anybody's going to be able to do that. I do not think we're going to break Pedro de la Rosa's record this season. I think that's coming maybe next season. But I got Max Verstappen 133.589 for fastest lap and driver. Cody, what's your thought?
I also have Max Verstappen taking the fastest lap. I think he's going to want to make a point that no one is going to catch him this year. And I've got the time a little slower than yours, 1 minute 33.887 seconds. So I suppose that means that I also don't think Pedro de la Rosa's record is going to be broken. And honestly, it's kind of a fun record, so I hope it sticks around for a while. I give it until maybe a year or two into the next set of regulations, because those cars are supposed to be a little smaller and lighter, which I think might get us to a little bit quicker lap times to finally take that one down.
Or the track has to be resurfaced. And as long as the track continues to have the same surface, I think that record is safe, because I don't think any of these tires, regardless of what Pirelli is going to put out there, are going to last long enough to get you that lap. Because I think 3/4 of the way through the lap, I think your tires are already starting to hurt, especially if you're trying to push. And if you're trying to push in a race, you're going to back off. Your natural instinct is going to be, okay, I know I have tires. I've gotten my purple sectors in. I can see my delta on my steering wheel, and I'm fine. Why do I have to, flat out in those last couple of corners there? So that's why I think they're going to actually, it will probably be on through the first two sectors, and then that third sector, I think they'll back off on it a little bit. But anyway, we will move into our bonus picks, and we've gone with P8, P9, and P10. So the bottom of the points, always where a lot of the fun is. We had some fun when we were trying to put these together, talking back and forth. But Cody, what you got for P8, P9, and P10?
So I really hope I'm wrong for P8, but I don't think the Aston Martin is going to be quite as much there at the start of the season as it was last year. So I've got Fernando Alonso coming in P8, still getting decent points, but I think there's a lot of cars that are going to be potentially better than the Aston Martin out of the gate here. I've got Daniel Ricciardo in P9 and Yuki Tsunoda in P10. So I think there's going to be some pretty decent points, at least at the bottom of the top 10 for the V-Carb car. I gotta get used to calling it that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm going to go with, because I don't want to call them racing bulls. It doesn't roll. So V-Carb it is, and I don't want to give the sponsor name as part of the team. That's just not how we roll. But the official entry is what it is. We all know that, and that's fine. I'm going to go. I do think the V-Carb car will come out of the blocks pretty good here. I'm not so sure about how it's going to look at other places, but I think here it can probably stand up. So Daniel Ricciardo P8, Lance Stroll for Aston Martin, I think in P9. I think Fernando Alonso will be a little bit higher up. I think that is kind of just where they are. Zhao Guan Yu is going to be kind of my upset. The Steak Sauber, hopefully coming out of the blocks pretty good. They're a tough team to try to figure out because they have some glory runs in them and they put up some lap time, but they don't look particularly great on race pace. So I'm hoping that Zhao Guan Yu can come on home for that. All right. So our prop bet for this race is going to be, because we always talk about testing, we talk about reliability. We said it was great across the board. Let's figure out who's not going to finish and why. So total DNFs for race one. Cody, what you got?
I'm going with 2 DNFs for race one. I think these cars have been historically reliable. You don't really see, unless it's Alpine, a whole lot of equipment failure DNFs lately. So I think as long as we can get through the first lap or two without a big wreck, I think it's the first race of the year. So you're probably going to have some kind of equipment related failures. So, but I don't think it's going to be much. So I'm going with 2.
All right. I think somebody's going to bump into each other. I think that first lap, everybody's going to be supercharged. And I think you're going to see 2 or 3 there. And it may be 2 or 3 terminal there. I think once you kind of get settled in, I think you're right. I think we're going to kind of see a pecking order and it'll probably spread out a little bit. But interesting to see, how the tire strategy plays out. Who's doing maybe a 2-stop, who does maybe a 3-stop. I can't see this as a 1-stop race. So I do think there will be some intermixing of the grid. So I'm going to go with 3 total DNFs because I do think somebody will clash with somebody else, especially early. All right. So before we head on out, 2 last things to tackle. One is how and when to watch your F1 this weekend, and note the different start times. And note the days. We're only about, as we're recording this on Wednesday night, we're about 7 hours away from Free Practice 1. Hey, look at that. So Free Practice 1, Thursday, 6:25 a.m. Eastern. You can find that in the U.S. on ESPN2. You can also find it as well on ESPN Plus and, of course, F1 TV. So those are kind of the caveats for all the sessions this year. But if you're looking for the broadcast, you can find it on ESPN2. And then for FP2, Thursday, 9:55 a.m. Eastern, ESPN2, FP3, Friday, 7:25 a.m. Eastern, ESPN2, qualifying, which will happen on Friday morning as opposed to Saturday morning, 10:55 a.m. Eastern, ESPN2. As for the race itself on Saturday, I almost said Sunday, I almost did it again. The pre-show, Saturday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern, ESPN, and the race itself kicks off 9:55 a.m. Eastern, Saturday morning, ESPN. No cartoons for you on your Saturday morning, but tune into your F1 and get excited for this season. All right, so before we hop on out, we did want to give kind of an overall prediction as to where we think the order is. We're actually really, really close to agreeing with each other, which is kind of scary. But we'll start with the constructors. Cody, I'll let you go first. So go from 10 to 1. What's your pecking order?
All right. And yes, Andy is 100% right. We were actually cracking ourselves up doing our constructors predictions here with how close they are. I've got Haas coming in 10th again, unfortunately. It's nice to hear that they maybe think they're squaring away some of their tire deg problems, but I don't think they're going to do enough to pull them out of the bottom. I've got Steak Sauber coming in 9th, kind of for the same reasons. Think that they're getting better, but the development against all the other teams has probably got a little bit to be desired. 8, I've got Alpine. They do seem to be struggling a little bit based on testing. I know the driver talent is there, but the car has to be there too. I think they're going to be struggling, especially in the beginning of the season. I've got Williams up in 7. Alex Albon is awesome, and I feel like he's probably going to be carrying the bulk of the points this year. I do hope Logan Sargent is able to improve and account for more than just a solitary point this year, but I think they're going to be doing well. I've got V-Carb moving all the way up to 6, and Daniel Ricciardo making a name for himself again and trying to put himself back into that Red Bull seat. Aston Martin, I think it's going to, what is it, fall down to 5th? I don't actually remember exactly where they finished last year, but I've got Aston Martin in 5th. I do think they're going to be mostly carried by Fernando Alonso, but who knows? Maybe Stroll will surprise me. I think this was the little bit of the controversial bit. I've got Mercedes falling down to 4th, and I think while their car has been improved according to the drivers, McLaren looked really strong the second half of last year, and maybe they're not going to come out at the beginning of the season here with that level of performance, but I do think McLaren is going to beat them out this year and come in 3rd, which I know would make Andy very happy. The top 2 here are really just based on what we've seen in testing and what we saw last year. Ferrari, I've got as coming in 2nd. They looked really good in testing. They've got 2 of the best young drivers on the grid who are really hungry, really wanting to prove themselves. And then number 1, we got to give it to Red Bull until we see otherwise. Even if Sergio Perez wasn't driving the second car, not hating on Perez or anything, but literally Max could win the championship for Red Bull by himself. And if the car is as good as we saw in testing, I think he very well might do that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're pretty well aligned here, but the way that I'm going to kind of break mine down is I think you have one clear front runner and then 3 different globs of 3 to maybe 4 teams in each glob. So at the back, you've got your glob of Haas, Stake Sauber, Alpine, and Williams. And it could be a matter of 1 or 2 races kind of determining who ultimately gets there. I'm going to put Haas in P10 because they got to show me before I can move them up. Stake Sauber, that's a project I can't figure out. It's definitely going to be an easy car to spot this year versus some other years. But I don't know enough. I can't say enough to really move them up a whole lot higher. Ferrari power, maybe that helps them out a little bit, but it hasn't in other years. So I think that's a team in transition until Audi comes in. And then there's some questioning whether Audi's actually going to really come in or not, but that's for another episode. P8, yeah, I wish I could put Alpine higher, but I can't because I don't know who's really running the show. And then they redesigned the whole car, and then it really didn't look like it cooked during the tests. So, and they're already now starting to play down expectations, and that's a team that usually aspires to challenge up, and now they're looking down. So that to me sends a lot of alarm bells for me as a fan. So they may really, really struggle early. P7, I'm giving Williams. I know they didn't have the world's greatest of tests, but I do think, James Vowles has got that program pointed in a good direction. I do think Alex Albon is a legit talent. It'd be interesting to see if he can play into the Mercedes go round, even though they're all saying he's not. We know he's not going back to Red Bull. Helmut Marko's already said that, and that didn't surprise me. But Williams will be, I think, the one who will play the fly in the normal pecking order. I think the first contender in that is Williams and then V-Carb, just because they are going to start out with that base of effectively an RB19 base with some other components added on or differentiated from there. I love their team principal. I love Lauren Mekies going over to that team. He's going to do good things. I think they're now coming away with Franz Tost. If they were about development of other drivers, now with Mekies, I think it's more about trying to win and trying to progress forward on their own. So it may take a year or two, but I think that's a team that you're going to see on the up in the next year or two. P5 through 3 is going to be really, really tight. I've got Aston Martin coming in at the end of that simply because I think they will start out strong and they'll fade a little bit back. I want to give McLaren P3 so bad. And And I don't necessarily know that I believe in the totality of the Mercedes pivot. They did come out with that interesting thing on the front wing that got everybody's attention during testing. Their body language looks really good. I think that they are much happier with their car. I can't believe that that is a fully curated car that's ready to go across different tracks. I think that that is a team, Mercedes, who I'm going to give P3 to, will come out early and establish a lead. And then when McLaren kicks into their gear, when they bring those updates on, like they're going to do, where do they fit in to that again? I think is going to be the question of this season. So I've got McLaren in P4 right now, Mercedes in P3, Ferrari a half step clear, I think, of that blob. Kind of going to be kind of on their own. They may have some really lonely races early. That may be interesting to see. But I think it's going to come down to, have they fixed their strategy issues? We know they can build a fast car. That's never been the problem. The problem has been execution on race day. So I want to see what that can happen if they are fixing that. And you have the dynamic of Carlos Sainz, who has nothing to lose. So is he going to play a team game? I don't think so. I think he's going to be out for himself.
Absolutely not. He wasn't
And
even
does
playing
that
the team game that much before.
right? And does that somehow hinder them? So that may be the only thing that, like I said, I know they're going to be fast, and I know the performance will be generally there. Execution on race day, that's my question mark for them. And then, of course, Thanos and Thanos Jr., the inevitable Red Bull Racing in P1. Yikes. Oh, my. I just hope it's not as dominant as last year. I'm hoping that last year is such a statistical anomaly that it can't be repeated, but somebody else doesn't step up and at least challenge them, they're just going to run away again. I hope I'm wrong about that. I really do, but that's how I see it as of right now.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the second coming of the first 3 years of Mercedes dominance, where it was just 3 years of lights out, like nobody can catch them. I think that's really where we're at, and I really don't think it's going to change until 2026, but one can hope.
And the only thing you had, even with when the Mercs were as dominant as they were, is you had at least a battle between the two of them. So, like, there was always the potential, like, oh, well, maybe they take each other out and somebody else can come in and, pick up the pieces. I don't see that happening. Unless Sergio Perez changes the narrative in more ways than one and can come out, like I've said it before, his first 5 races have to be the races of his life. He's got to drive the wheels off of that thing in these first 5 races, because otherwise I think the chapter isn't closed, but Helmut Marko's got his finger on the book and he's closing the front cover of it really quickly.
Even if he does drive the best races of his life, the first 5 races, they're going to bring some upgrades to the car. Max is going to be like, okay, cool. And Perez is going to have a hard time driving the car, and that's going to be the end of it.
Could be. I mean, that is a rational, data-backed answer. That very well could be. I'm trying to type up this season here, if you haven't figured that out. But anyway, we're doing our best here. So quick stab at the top 10 drivers. You can go 10 to 1 or 1 to 10. How do you want to do it?
I'm going to go 1 to 10, I think. Okay. I think we've all come to the conclusion that Max Verstappen is by far the favorite to win again this year. So if you don't mind me taking the top 10 first, I've got Max Verstappen coming in P1 for the season. That would be 4 consecutive championships. Be really something. I do think that Sergio Perez is going to do well enough to finish in P2 again. I do think it's going to be really, really close between him and probably the next 5 or 6 drivers after him. And I think that Max is going to be so far clear of him that he probably will not be returning to the Red Bull seat after this season, which is a shame because I really like Perez. And the fact that, Mexico has a representative in Formula One is really cool. So I hope that he doesn't leave the sport. I don't think he's going to be staying in that seat, though, beyond this year, even if he comes in P2, which is kind of crazy to say. Next, I've got The Ferraris, I think they're going to be really good. I've got Leclerc coming in third, beating out Sainz in fourth. I think we are going to see improvement from McLaren. I don't think they're going to catch Ferrari, though, as we said in the constructors. So I've got Norris coming in P5. Norris has been really good and really impressed me, especially this last season. Once the car got better, I think he got more P2s than anyone else on the grid last year, which, considering the car was awful for like the first third of the year to third to half, like, that's really impressive. And I think he's going to continue to impress. This one makes me a little sad, might be a little controversial, but I've got Hamilton sinking down to P6, and I don't think it's going to be on him. I think it's going to be just that this year it's going to be much more competitive in that glob. And I don't know if the Mercedes is good enough to really stand out above the rest. So I think Hamilton will beat out his teammate and will overall do very well, but I don't think it's going to be good enough to be better than sixth. I've got Piastri coming in seventh. Again, I think McLaren's going to be pretty good. I think Piastri is going to be really good. He's very talented. I think, though, based on last year, he's got maybe another season or two to really, be one of those top contenders. But I do think he's going to perform very well. Eighth, I've got Russell. Don't remember exactly where Russell finished last year, so I feel like eighth is probably pretty close to where he finished last year. And again, I don't think it's all on him. Russell's really good, especially over one lap. But I think Hamilton is going to show him up one more time before he leaves. And I think that, again, the Mercedes is just not going to quite be there at all the tracks. And this is the one that really disappoints me, but I couldn't fit him in anywhere higher based on all the other logic I just gave. I've got Fernando Alonso down in P9. Now, I think there's going to be a few tracks and a few situations where Alonso is really, really going to shine. I mean, come on, baby. Like, I want to see that Monaco victory. That would be the greatest thing. But over the course of the full, what are we up to now? 24 races in the season. Yep. I don't think that Aston Martin is going to be there for all 24. I'm not as confident in them starting off great this year. I do think that they still have to figure out those in-season upgrades to keep the performance of the car improving. I think Aston Martin is really building up to be a great team. But I honestly think that it's not going to be until the regulations change again that we're going to see them possibly break into those top contenders. And then lastly, and this is me just really hoping against hope, I think that Daniel Ricciardo will squeeze into that 10th spot in the top 10, which would really, I think, drive home the point that he's still got it and that he deserves to come back into that second Red Bull seat.
All right. I like your top 10. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. We're a little bit different in some areas here. I do have Max Verstappen in P1. It is his to lose, and I don't see anything that says he's not as motivated as he ever was. You watch him drive in like sim races and stuff, and he's dominant there. The guy, you're going to look back and I know he's a divisive figure for a lot of reasons, but you almost have to sit back and almost kind of understand that you're watching like genius at work here type stuff with that guy in that car. So yeah, Max Verstappen definitely going to probably take this championship again. In terms of everybody else after Max, I do think Charles Leclerc is going to put in, hopefully he'll get a couple more race wins and hopefully be able to distinguish himself amongst his peers and come home P2, because I think that that's kind of where I would like to see him. I do think Sergio Perez will not have a bad season, but I don't think he will have a great season. I do tend to agree with you, Cody, that he probably will be out at the end of this season, but I've got him slotted in P3 because if you can't drive this car to at least there, boy, you got problems. And I'm glad you've got McLaren in front of Mercedes. I can't see it until I see it. So I've got Lewis Hamilton, who I think is the better of the two Mercedes drivers right now, just in front of Lando Norris, because I think Norris will be right. So 4 is Hamilton, 5 Norris. Carlos Sainz, I think he's going to have some more Ferrari hard luck hit him, especially now that he's kind of the sitting on his own. I think he will have some amazing highs. I almost expect him to win another race this year, but I also think he's going to have the lows of not getting the preferred strategy and them kind of hanging him out to dry strategy wise a couple of times. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. P7, I've got George Russell. Solid driver, solid team. Think the team has got their stuff kind of handled, but I don't see him being uber elite yet. He's kind of in that class, like he's around Norris on talent. Give him the same car, maybe one day it's one day it's another type situation, but I don't know that he's got the whole package yet, so I'm going to give him P7. P8, this also pains me to put Fernando Alonso here, but I can't put him any higher because I don't see where Aston, unless they come out of the boxes and they're scoring podiums, where that falls in here. So I think they're going to be solid. They're going to be that 6th, 7th, 8th every week. They're going to be there. They're going to be in the conversation. Maybe they get a stray podium here or there, but I can't see a whole lot more than that right now. P9, I am giving that to Oscar Piastri. I do think he has a little bit more development to do, particularly on race day. Qualifying wise, I think he's going to give Lando fits, which is what I would love to see. And I would love to see some better race development, but I think it's over the course of the race and how does he manage the tires. And that may be something that the McLaren car, especially early, has a bit of a bugaboo about it. So that's why I don't know that he's going to be able to score as much. But I'm very bullish on him in the future. I think he is worth every bit the hype that he has. And for P10, I would love to see Daniel Ricciardo in there, but I think the reality is the other Aston Martin, he held on to it somehow last year after not scoring for like 6 weeks. So Lance Stroll probably, will show up with a, odd podium and get way up there in the standings and then fall back down kind of as the season goes, because that's kind of what the pattern has been. But I don't see him any higher than that. So that's our put it in a box. We'll put in those predictions. We'll look back on it after Abu Dhabi and see how right or how wrong we really were. But now they're on paper, so at least I know where to find them. All right. Well, Cody, any final thoughts before we head on out of here?
Just that I'm really excited for Formula One to be back. I am, because of the way the timing is going for this weekend with the race being on Saturday and qualifying being on Friday. I am slightly disappointed because I looked at the time the qualifying is going to be on, which is the first part that I'm really excited for. Practice is fun, but qualifying is where you start to actually prove yourself. And of course, it's right in the middle of all my Friday morning meetings. So, if any of my coworkers are watching and listening to this, I promise I won't be watching qualifying while we're in meetings. And I'll just have to watch it later.
This is where I will teach you where to place your phone so that you can't see it. But all right, so right now I'm looking at my phone. Can you tell that I'm looking at my phone? Maybe.
So far as maybe you're looking at your keyboard or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe I'm just going like this and looking down while I look my arm up or something like that. Shouldn't be giving away these secrets, I guess. But that may be what we end up doing. I will try my best to do a live tweet of the qualifying. I don't know how well that's going to come off. I may have to pull the plug on it depending on what my job is doing on a Friday. But anyway, watch our social media across the weekend. Any big developments, we'll obviously try to bring them to you as we learn them. And we're going to be doing our first official race review of the season. We're going to do this on Saturday. We're going to record it on Saturday. I don't know exactly when it'll drop. If I can make it drop Saturday, I will. But look out for that. It's exciting. We're going to be up and running, and we got 24 of these bad boys to go do. So we're going to get into all that. I am excited for this season. Even if Max runs away with it again, I'm still going to be damn excited for the season because, you know what? It's Formula One, baby, and I love it. So, we will talk to you again on Saturday. And until then, May all your laps be fast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Outlap F1 podcast. If you like what you heard, click that subscribe button and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you want to connect with us outside of the show, check out our website at www.outlapf1.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at OutlapF1 Podcast, or email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. As always, thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you on the next one.